this webinar. Thank you for joining us. This webinar is part of CEF Webinar Series and the 5th webinar of this series. And we decided to do webinar and actually created a mini webinar series on FMC topic. Is to the FMC has really wide impact and ownership be broader on than only Ministries of Finance. So with the webinar and webinar series, we will elaborate on implications of FMC and reforms and for further insight on the preconditions that need to be in place for effective implementation on PIC. After a short introduction, we will start with 3 presentations. I'm honored to you as speakers. First speaker will be Nihat Nakash, Senior Program Advisor CEF. He will describe and provide outline of this webinar and 2 other webinars, and he will also present objectives of these webinars. Then we will have a presentation by Mr. Manfred van Kesteren, Senior Advisor Auditor at the Ministry of Finance. Currently, he's based in Kiev, Ukraine. He will speak about the case of Netherlands. Then presentation will focus on FMC PIC strategic consideration, and it will be delivered by Mr. Noel Hepworth, Independent Public Policy Professional, who's also CEF Associate Fellow. After this short presentations, we would like to engage you in a discussion. So we will open and I'll ask you already during this webinar to share with us questions, which we will then discuss after presentations. Together, this webinar will be up to 90 minutes long. And as already shared Alexander, we kindly ask you to stay muted during this webinar. If you have any technical questions, technical issue, please share this on chat privately with Alexander, and he's using the name Center of Excellence in Finance. This webinar will be recorded and it's actually already enabled. This is to share with you video and also to share video with others who might be interested in listening this webinar later. As already mentioned, we would like to ask you to share with us questions in the chat area. Use chat area on the right side of your screen under video. You can open it and then select whom you would like to share this message, and you share it with us. Please share your message with everyone. We would also like to get from you. That's why right after this webinar, we will share with you a link. And by clicking on this link, SurveyMonkey will open. It is a short, anonymous survey with which we would like to ask you about your satisfaction with this webinar. Now we will give floor to Nakash. And already opening his presentation, and before he starts speaking, I would like to ask, if possible, that you use your chat option to introduce yourself. So please, in open chat and write in a message bar your name, institution, country, and something short about you, so that we will know who's following this webinar. Thank you. Nihat, floor.
Thank you, and warm conception to the colleagues in the faculty, and of course to all of you who have joined us today. I believe we are covering an important topic dealing with financial management and control beyond the Ministries of Finance. And on this introductory slide, you can go from our last year's event, which has demonstrated quite a lot of need for further awareness raising as well as technical training in this area. I'll give you a brief overview of the webinar series objectives and the issues that the FMC webinars will cover in particular. Here at the CEF, together with our fellows and partners, would like to achieve a number of objectives with this webinar series. The first one is to promote the understanding, the context and importance of public internal controls and FMC for good and accountability. I'd like to explain the concepts and framework that provides the theoretical underpinnings of PIC or FMC. We would also like to touch on a topic which is distinguishing between the ownership over harmonization of public internal controls between the Ministries of Finance and ministries or spending units. Possibilities that fully full-fledged PIC imposes on managers and consider the appropriate existing management structures, make clear the benefits of public internal controls FMC, as well as explore how PIC and FMC relate to public administration, PFM, public financial management, and other reforms taking place in the public sector. Ultimately, we hope that this webinar series, the contents and the topics that we will discuss will help inform future policy and action plan formulation in the countries that are still dealing with the EU accession requirements. I tried to summarize all of these objectives in one overarching goal of the webinar series. It is about trying to correct very frequent misunderstanding that FMC is a technical financial budgetary control reform which is only of interest to finance officers and the Ministry of Finance. Indeed, for a majority of our countries, experience in traditional public administration with approaches to governance based on control. What we need to consider more is how management fits in and what it requires in terms of making judgments, take risks with a view to achieving the objectives efficiently and effectively, and having the necessary skills and financial literacy to do so. On this slide, I will give a brief overview of the historical developments and importance of the internal financial control concept for Southeast European region. C reforms came to the light in Southeast European countries made through the EU accession. They are treated specifically in Chapter 32, which deals with financial control. We should note here that the concept was developed in early 2000s by the European Commission to respond an internal control system framework. Potential candidate countries could model the establishment and development of internal systems. Concept of PIFC, as it was named at the time, was influenced also by the European Commission's own effort to improve management and control in the European institutions and member countries. That takes its roots back in the so-called new public management ideas introduced in the 1980s and 1990s with the aim of bringing a more business-like approach to management of public service delivery. It was not an EU accession. One point of interest for me was that it was not an accession requirement until the fifth round of enlargement, when the countries with former communist governance arrangements were applying for membership in the EU, and the idea was to find a common framework to address management issues in those countries that had so-called traditional practices with narrow understanding and direction of financial management and control, focus on compliance and regularity, centralization of controls, etc. There are explicit EU directives or regulations which should be adopted or transposed under PIFC. The requirement is to align the national system with internal standards and best practices, which make a challenge because PIFC is then a moving target, meaning that we should constantly strive towards ongoing improvements. The importance of PIFC reforms lies also in the effect it has on the governance landscape, public financial management. PIFC has introduced new institutional actors, standards, and new management tools. Plus, it is taking place simultaneously with other important reforms in budgetary area, in accounting area, in human resource management area. In terms of institutional actors, all the countries, I believe by now, harmonization units within the Ministries of Finance, and in the line ministries, most of the countries have opted for a decentralized internal audit services model. New concepts that were introduced were those of managerial accountability, value for money, and a much broader understanding of the internal control. And new roles mean professionalization of the existing management structures and finance departments. I will put this as a rhetorical question, and I hope that we will be able to explore this topic further in the seminar. The old formula of PIFC equals FMC plus IA, meaning internal audit plus central harmonization unit. Question is developed when it's promoted with the introduction of the PIFC concept was relevant in terms of promoting awareness. But the question now is that with our current understanding that public internal controls affect much more than the Ministries of Finance, and that FMC and internal audit are inseparably connected, I would like us to consider whether this formula is still a valid one. In terms of financial management, management should provide the financial framework that helps managers to allow and fulfill their responsibilities. Excuse me. In many Southeast European countries, lack of accountability to deliver the objectives of the organization on time, in accordance with the standard, and within budget, which are heavily evidenced both in internal audit reports and the media reports, have introduced difficulties in promoting sound financial management. This was coupled with insufficient understanding of the need for financial literacy among those who are the decision makers in their respective organization. Part can be attributed to the fact that where the focus of management is on inputs and where the accountability of the managers is related to budgetary control and compliance, the need to use broader managerial tools and approaches are restricted. I will spend the last couple of minutes of my presentation just to explain the underpinnings of the internal control concept as promoted by the European Commission. Common basis of understanding this common model is the so-called COSO framework, and I believe many of you have already seen or at least heard of this now, well, rather cube. As you see, it's part of a concept called COSO Internal Control Integrated Framework, which is now, well, quarter of a century old, with respect to its original 1992 release. It has been updated in 2013. The important thing to understand about the cube is its high relevance for the reform agenda. Unfortunately, the experience has shown, and comparative studies have shown, that although the cube has been widely promoted, there's a very difficult misunderstanding of what the full implications are and how management and accounting arrangements need to be changed in order to allow components of the COSO framework to function in an integrated manner. Why is it so effective? Why is it so relevant for us? First of all, it's designed to be used by organizations to both develop and then assess the effectiveness of internal control in achieving the objectives as determined by management. It is the best practice model and a common framework for internal control, which is evidenced in the fact that it forms the backbone of the internal control system in the guidance for internal control standard, which are in turn used by all the public sector external auditors or the supreme audit institutions who are members of the INTOSAI. Of relevance for our region, COSO framework is already reflected in the regulation and methodological guidance, which are normally mandatory for all general government institutions. The challenge now is how do we translate these words into practice, and how do we see the necessary prerequisites for the COSO framework to deliver upon its promise. Just in a few minutes, I'm aware of the time and that I'm a little bit over, but just we define internal control simply in terms of confirming a common understanding among the participants today. I will use the official definition of the internal control from the COSO framework, which specifies that internal control is a process affected by directors or the respective governance structures, management, and personnel, which is designed to provide reasonable assurance regarding the achievement of the objectives relating to operations, reporting, and compliance. And I want to spend just a few moments focusing on the implications of this. First of all, the process is not an end in itself, and I will add that it is a continuous process. Second, it is affected by people across different organizational levels and across the organizational lines. Internal control also provides reasonable assurance, meaning not complete assurance during the achievement of the desired outcomes. And finally, internal control should always be seen in relation to the objectives which it meant to secure. Also, useful taxonomy of objectives, ones you can also see on the top of the cube. The objectives are primarily distinguished between operations objectives, reporting objectives, and compliance objectives. And again, it underscores the need for effective, efficient operations, regarding assets against loss, ensuring reliable, timely, and transparent internal, external, financial and non-financial reporting, and ultimately compliance, meaning that our operations are adjusted to the laws, regulations, and any standards that our organization is required to follow. To put these concepts a little bit active, internal controls, financial management and controls, public financial management and governance. What would be the actions? Effective internal control in our respective institutions and across government are necessary. They underpin sound financial management control in terms of preventing leakages and ensuring effective and efficient service delivery in accordance with the organization's objectives. Sound PFM, in turn, enables good governance, and in this context, good governance on a government or society-wide level. The main point of all of these systems is to deliver the objectives efficiently and effectively. So when I was trying to, for myself, I believe that this system of cogs and wheels illustrates very well that functioning of one of these concepts is a prerequisite for the others to follow. I will conclude. Very much for your attention, and looking forward to any questions. And now I invite Manfred to pick up. Thank you.
Thank you, Hat, for presentation. Now Manfred, let's start. Okay. So we have a presentation by Manfred Kesteren on PEAK in a Dutch perspective. He will share with us Dutch experience. And Manfred's presentation and Noel's presentation will provide further insight into a strategic perspective of FMC PEAK. So why it matters in context of good governance, then also why it is necessary for sound public financial management. Also, we will discuss that FMC PEAK is a managerial, not only technical reform, and also share messages what are benefits of FMC. Management operation is so now we will thank you. We can't hear you at the moment. Yeah, we can.
You hear me now?
And your participants, yes, I would just like to share one more message for participants. If you have any questions, share it or write it down in the chat area, and we will answer all your questions after all three presentations. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Kaya, for your introduction, and good morning, and for some people, good afternoon today at this second presentation this morning. I'm honored to be invited as a speaker for this topic, FMC, together with Noel and Nihat. So I hope that my part and my contribution will be interesting for you. I will presentation mainly on public internal control from the Dutch perspective. How in the Netherlands do we organize, let's say, the key elements that the public internal control with the specific focus on financial management and control. In Nihat's presentation, I think there were a few very nice elements mentioned, also later for the discussion. I think that might be interesting, especially this view also on financial management as being an integral part of internal control as a whole. So that is something I think also Noel will touch in his presentation, and I think that is a good, let's say, element also for further discussion and making understand how FMC is embedded in the total overall public internal control picture. Okay, let me see if I can. It works. Okay, public internal control. I always like to make a start with comparing, let's say, what you can call political choice. What is the choice of how we organize our public governance in the public sector? You can see it in this nice little cartoon at the bottom. There are two roads or two paths to take: the bad governance and the path of good governance. Now, of course, when we look at the fundamental principles underlying public internal control, as it was described by Nihat earlier, that those principles adhere to what we call a good public governance. So good public governance is, let's say, the underlying philosophy why public internal control, and therefore also financial management and control, is important in you choose the path of reform towards good governance. Actually, in bullets are mentioned here that these principles, and I want to lift out two of that is clear objectives and responsibilities, together with efficiency and effectiveness and accountability obligations. Well, in a nutshell, these three bullets, so to say, anchor the key element of what we call financial management and control. Later, that the manager, every level in the organization is responsible for reaching the objectives that are set for him or her in an efficient and effective way. That brings certain responsibilities with it and also accountability obligations towards high managerial levels, but also externally to the general public or the parliament. Those aspects make FMC, in my opinion. I will later on zoom into that a little bit more, but keep this in mind because it will also come later when Noel touches more the sensitive sides of these aspects. This morning I want to have a look at public internal control, specific financial management and control, by using a metaphor. The metaphor I'm going to use is that I'm going to build a house for you, and this house you can see as any public institution in any given sector. Houses together should make, let's say, the city of good governance, or governance if it is not organized very well. That is, I said it earlier, partly also a political choice and a choice. Okay, so we start building a house. We start with an empty lot. Of course, this is not reflecting your reality because you already have control arrangements in place. Maybe not always aligned with how the European Commission sees it, but let's say public environment has already in place certain arrangements that can be considered as the internal control framework of the organization. Build is zooming in on aspects that adhere and are aligned with this idea of good governance. And I will touch on some specific elements that are aligned with this principle. And the first one I want to address is, and all probably know this term very well, is managerial accountability. Managerial accountability is seen as, let's say, the key cornerstone of public internal control, but also of financial management and control. Managerial accountability, in a nutshell, is that within the organization, within any public institution, that there should be, let's say, clear delegated responsibilities, and along with that, or delegated authorities that managers have, let's say, power and the authority to make decisions how they will reach their objectives. and to what extent they are going to use their resources in terms of budget, but also in terms of other resources, people, material, etc. That makes, let's say, the fundamental key cornerstone of FMC and public internal control in general. Important is this word delegated. What we see in a lot of countries where we, as the Netherlands, are active is that in a lot of, let's say, like environments, the delegation of responsibilities and authorities is very limited. In a lot of cases, we see the minister still taking, let's say, operational decisions that easily could have been delegated to other, let's say, operational managerial levels. In our work, in the projects that we do, we see that as one of the biggest, let's say, obstacles to put FMC in place. Well, later we'll touch this issue more in depth, but keep also in mind that this managerial accountability and how it is cascaded in the organization, a clear mandate structure leads to the objectives in the organization, from strategic, tactical, operational objectives. That is a key fundamental issue that first needs to be in place. So, we need oil. You can't build a house in a swamp. Well, you try it, but it will probably not be that successful. So, for public internal control and FMC to work, some what we call external arrangements needs to be in place. Nihat, in his last slide, already touched one of them, that there should be a clear connection with other reforms. Think of public administration reform, public financial management, service reform. The linkage, seeing that it is interconnected with public internal control, is crucial. So good legislative support and good methodological support should be in place. We see in several countries that sometimes the legislation is not really, let's say, supportive of creating an environment in which FMC arrangements or public internal control arrangements can thrive. Sometimes let's say the key definitions or the key elements of public internal control are not described. Sometimes laws or regulations contradict each other, which is of course not favorable of building the house that we are going to build, a house of good governance. So government-wide, there should be arrangements in place in terms of sufficient resources, in terms of budget, but also good IT support, human resource support. These ends have more, let's say, an external, government-wide perspective that needs to be in place and should, let's say, be supportive to public internal control and FMC within the institutions. And of this soil part, you see political support, supportive ethical culture, and good public governance. Of course, these, I said in the beginning, these is more, let's say, the fundamental principles that need to be adhered to, and that is in a lot of cases that starts at the political level. For today, level that much, but my presentation, I should mention it to clear how FMC is embedded not only internally, but has a link with these external developments. Let's now look at the house itself. Every house has a living room. Well, in this case, we call financial management and control in the first line. The first line means the level of every manager who is responsible for programs, for processes. It can be a project. The manager has certain responsibilities, and that, of course, certain objectives that he or she needs to reach. These objectives should be clear and unambiguous for these managers. And adhere to, let's say, the achievements of these objectives, certain responsibilities should be granted to these managers and certain authorities to ensure that the objective can be reached in an efficient and effective way in line with laws and regulations. And so that is what we call financial management and control in the first line. That is where the manager is responsible for organizing control within the realm of his or her responsibility. That is a big responsibility. The responsibility extends beyond only, let's say, adhering to rules, regulations, and compliance. No, it is also a responsibility for ensuring that the programs, processes, projects, etc., are performed in an efficient and effective way, and that no budget, resources, other resources are misused. And so a lot of responsibilities for every manager at every level in the organization. So we are not talking here only about the senior managerial level, but also the operational level, maybe actually the operational level, where these responsibilities should be defined. Okay, every manager needs to work in this. So that's where the second line comes in, as we call it. The second line you can see as supportive functions within the organization that help manager fulfilling his responsibilities in reaching the objectives in an efficient, effective way, but also responsibilities regarding organizing internal control and risk management in a good way. And so he needs support. He can't do everything by himself. So what you see in a lot of organizations, also in the Netherlands, in our public, let's say, institutions, there are supportive functions for management that help them in this. When you especially only zoom in on the financial management side, the financial management support, that usually comes, of course, from the financial departments. But that does not only mean supportive in terms of being the accountant of the organization. No, it also means actively helping and supporting and monitoring internal control system that management in the first line is responsible for. So when I talk about the second line, yes, I mean the financial department, but it can also be, for example, the IT department, who can help management in creating awareness of IT risks, for example, and advising them in how certain controls can be embedded in to avoid these risks. So the second line of management and control is a managerial function, but it is a supportive managerial function, which focuses on internal control. So it has a monitoring side. It helps manager in the management process, the development of procedures, regulations, and policies. So also supporting management in the design and the architecture of the internal control processes embedded in the organization. And ensuring that information systems are in place that could provide information that helps the managers in the first line, but also that gives the information for efficient and effective monitoring of internal control. The first line we talked about is managerial responsibility, being responsible for efficient, effective objectives. A link between the first and the second line in the Netherlands is what we call the plan. Control means nothing more than the arrangements that are put in place that help you to report about the issues that matter, about crucial performance indicators that again about not only if the objectives are reached, and not about if the financial management has been done according to rules and regulations, but also about how the performance has been conducted. Did the internal controls do what they were supposed to do? And these aspects also should be an integral part of what we call managerial reporting. And there should be a clear link to between what planned, what allocated in terms of budget and resources, what was the performance, how did we ultimately perform, and of course, did we reach our objectives, and to what extent did we reach it, and we link that back to how the initial planning was. So that is a continuous cycle that needs to be, let's say, in place at every managerial level of the organization. That is what accountability, responsibility of every manager, not only the top, also the top, but also operational management. Oh, I made a mistake. Well, I can draw a few lines which let's say show you that it is indeed a cycle. So this supports the first line in setting up the internal control, but that brings along responsibility for management through their planning and control arrangements and their reporting to have a feedback loop to the second line, which gathers all the information that gives, let's say, a good picture of how management and how performance of the internal processes actually was. And of course, we ultimately also consolidated toward external accountability actors. And that is, in principle, when you look at FMC internally, in-house, that is how the game should be played between the first and the second line. Of course, audit, which we don't regard as, let's say, part of this managerial cycle. The managerial cycle is only the first and the second line, and that is where the managerial responsibility takes place. An internal audit, comfortably from the attic of the house, more or less down to the quality of this FMC system as a whole. Then, of course, on specific programs and processes, they can zoom in on how the second line is functioning. They can on how the planning and control cycle is functioning. But the role of internal audit should be that objective and independent look at how this total system of FMC is functioning. What we see in a lot of countries is that internal audit sometimes goes down one etage of house and takes over second line responsibilities. Sometimes the internal audit perform what you could call what let's say in theory should be a more second line or managerial function, and really let's say assist management on the level of individual control, so to say. But that should not be let's say in the Dutch view be mixed too much with the second line responsibilities, because again, second line responsibilities is in essence really a managerial function. Make the picture complete, I will not zoom into that today. On the side there is a column called development, because of course structure-wise it looks quite logical, but you can, especially in countries in reform, that this delegate structure of responsibilities and authorities doesn't happen from one day to the next. We are not here about an organizational structural change. It is also partly a cultural change that needs to take place almost in the ears of the managers. They need to realize that responsibilities, authorities, that they shift when financial management and control is introduced in line with PIC. External and internal. I don't know if you see it on this slide, that these are two different but FMC is embedded in that total picture. And to complete, of course, there is also what sometimes is called the fourth line here, nicely put as a sun. It can be the Court of Accounts or the Supreme Audit Institution. Of course, it'll be a dark cloud, depending on how you look at it. But respect, the picture is complete. And you see that FMC is really needs to take place within the institutions themselves. Sorry, my telephone. Okay, I realize the time because my 20 minutes are up. Nevertheless, very quickly, I will hand over to Noel, give summary points. When you saw on the previous slide, try to read in your countries, what's our house look like? Is it similar? Major-wise, it is similar, but especially these material responsibilities, are they really cascaded down, aligned with clear objectives? Our reporting, is there a clear alignment between planning, budget, resources, performance, and outcome and output? Yes or no? So these are aspects that also in upcoming webinars will be explored, of course. Senior management at the top has a role. On this slide, I briefly mentioned a couple of crucial aspects in that respect. The delegation aspect is a crucial aspect. So senior management needs, to some extent, have trust in operation, and operational management, in their turn, needs to have some loyalty towards the senior management. And these underlying, let's say, almost aspects that need to be in place. That in the Netherlands we usually have what we call contract relationships between the top and operational management, in which clear arrangements are being made about what is reported about, how responsibility is divided, how are the authorities over resources divided, etc. We work with what we call in-control statements, and not only about our budget spent in the correct way, but also about the performance itself and about the internal control arrangements. Last but not least, in the Netherlands, there is also a very clear distinction between the political side of making and the operational side. And that is, we have a clear distinction in that, so that our ministers usually are not, let's say, bothered with internal operational issues. It's all delegated also on the senior level to what we call the state secretaries, or the secretary generals. Sorry. This is pretty much everything that I told. This delegated managerial accountability is one of the cornerstones of public internal control. Supportive functions in the organization are crucial to make FMC work. For the arrangement, that is the financial department, but have this broad on internal control. Although human resources and IT departments, of course, are supportive functions that shape the total control configuration in an organization. Public internal control should be built on proper soil, already mentioned. That is more the external factor, but a crucial one. The interconnection between the lines, the first line and the second line, but also how they work together with the third line is crucial. And is always this planning and control. What I'd say the arrangements in terms of reporting, etc. Samuel will also touch these, so I will also, looking at the time, not go in depth with it, but ultimately it is about indeed an economic, efficient, and effective use of our resources, public resources, in order to reach the objectives that are set for management on the level of the organization. And organized well, PRC and FMC hand in hand will give, let's say, senior management more time to focus on the things that they are responsible for, and that is more the strategical decision making in the organization, and not the operational issues that easily can be delegated at other levels of the organization. So if you have any questions later, of course you can always get in touch. Also later in the discussion we will get in touch. I leave it for right now, because I know Noel will continue zoom on specific elements that I introduced. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mark. for a very comprehensive and practical presentation. Now we will quickly hand over to Noel, who will open his presentation in some seconds. So Noel will further elaborate on strategic applications of FMC reforms, in particular, what difference does it make to decision making? So why it is important to regard FMC reforms as managerial reform, not only technical reform. He will also point out benefits of FMC. Let me see. No?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Yes.
I can see the slides.
Well, you can share screen. When under Quick Start, there is a Share Screen button in the middle, and then we will also see your presentation. We still can't. Please open up.
Okay.
Okay.
Where are we?
Yes, we are there. You have full screen option. Orange bar. Okay.
Yes.
You
Thank
are speaking, Nurul.
you very much, and good morning, or good morning, everybody. Well, we talked about the aspects of financial management and internal control, and I'm sure that you are all well aware of them. The practical problem is how do you actually put in place, given your operating environments, and that's primarily what I want to talk about. First of all, I want to say that the purpose of public control is achieving objectives and so efficiently and effectively. Manfred mentioned that. But it's actually a very difficult thing to do. And say we have objectives, but in practice, those objectives are generally not very good, they're not defined, they're not precise. Therefore, it's very difficult to hold people to account for achieving the objectives. And the point is, who is responsible for public internal control? Well, actually, it's the manager. It's the Ministry of Finance. It's not the head of finance in a ministry. It's the manager. And then the point I want to make is we talk about management and control and public internal control, but in fact, they're the same thing. Management and control is just one aspect of public internal control. And Manfred said what it's there for is to support the manager. Who is the manager? The manager is the decision maker. Now, my experience of all the countries in the SEE region and other countries like Moldova, Georgia, and Armenia, and so on, is that the manager is usually a politically appointed official. He's a deputy minister, and then makes all the decisions, even the most trivial decisions. And I've given some examples on the slide. Any separation of strategic policy and national decisions. So strategy and policy should normally be the responsibility of the politician. Operational decisions would not be the responsibility of the operational manager. Made the point in the Netherlands that the Secretary General is responsible for operational decisions. The Minister and Deputy Ministers are responsible for policy and strategy. But in countries where most of you are from, the ability is not divided between strategy and policy and operational decisions. The second is responsible for all decisions. So there are certain adverse consequences of this, the poor governance that Manfred referred to. Just frequently overloaded. They're under enormous pressure. They have to work very long hours. They're constantly signing documents of one sort or another, and so on. The problem is that they are not technically trained in the techniques of a service. So a great deal about the operational side of a service or activity. The problem is that politicians change their jobs very rapidly, and they change them not for technical reasons, for reasons of technical competence, but because of the ebbs and flows of political pressure of one sort or another. So they may be in office for a very short period of time, and they have a deal of experience, and their background may be nothing to do with service for which they are responsible. Again, because they're politically appointed, that they make will be dominated by political considerations rather than other considerations, operational considerations. And because thinking strategy and policy is very difficult indeed, then the manager, the politician, will focus mostly on operational activity, the thing that is not really that competent to deal with. So the problem in countries of how do you improve the quality of management? How do you make the manager into a manager? The arrangements that exist in most of your countries, the management responsibilities include administering the services. He has objectives, sometimes he doesn't have objectives, but as I said, by and large, the objectives will be pretty imprecise, so it makes it difficult to hold the manager to account. The budget objectives won't be linked. There'll be additional linkages. We'll have program budgets where notionally linked to objectives, but in practice they're not. The focus of control will be on meeting budgetary limits. So the focus is on controlling inputs rather than what those inputs are achieving. And one of the purposes of internal control is about outputs, not about inputs. The control will be ensuring that the financial and procurement regulations are adhered to, and that you don't follow precisely the rules and regulations. Then management, which is about risk, so the risk of being penalised because it's not followed the rules exactly, and implemented by financial inspection regimes and other administrative rules. And with additional arrangements, the person responsible makes all or most of the administrative decisions necessary for the day-to-day running of the organisation. Why do they need to do that? Internal control is properly implemented. Political managers' responsibilities of all the things that I've just outlined on the previous slide are two. Because the political has got to define objectives, define operational performance standards, and he's got to ensure that these objectives and the performance standards are achieved with budgetary limits. That's a very difficult thing to do. Involved more deeply in the budget preparation process, not in agreeing the overall spending limits, but distribution of that budget over different types of input. How much you need to spend on personnel, to spend on supplies and services, transport, premises, overheads, and so on, and probably the types of personnel needed, what they should be paid, and so on. These things need to be linked to the achievement of the objectives and performance standards. Very often, a man will have absolutely no control over personnel at all. He'll be told, this is the personnel that you've got, these are the pay that these people are to have, the distribution over various skills, and so on. And then during the year, because you have to remember that the budget is produced a year or more in advance, the circumstances in which the budget was prepared may be very different from operational circumstances in which the activity is taking place. So it changes in it. And usually the manager has great difficulty in making changes because they all have to be approved by the Ministry of Finance or the Treasury, very often in a lot of detail. And therefore, when somebody else takes those types of decisions, what you're doing is actually shifting responsibility away from the manager. So what difference does PIC make to decision making? Well, it's important that there is the monitoring of activity to ensure that the objectives are delivered within the budget. So the manager must be constantly alive to whether or not the objectives are being delivered. So it isn't just a matter of maintaining budgetary control, which is very important. Whether it should be control in the way it's traditionally been is a matter for discussion. But it also has to make sure that he is delivering the objectives and the performance standards that are required and which are assumed to exist within the policy and strategy of the organisation. Yes, performance and accounting information is required to secure efficiency and effectiveness. Here, it will mean thinking about what are individual cost centres and how those individual cost centres perform. So a centre may be a regional office, it could be a unit, it could be a type of criminal activity, it could be an academic course, it could be a military unit, it could be a military training activity, and so on. So there are lots and lots of potential cost centres. Managers need to be alive to those, and it's the manager who should decide what are the appropriate cost centres for the purposes of delivering efficiency and effectiveness. And into that level of detail, budget and accounting systems will not deal with it, will not address it, will not give the information that the manager actually needs. The manager is also responsible for ensuring that the internal control process apply to the area for which the manager is responsibility, that there are proper personnel arrangements, that there are proper communication arrangements within the staff, that there is information supplied to each manager, sub-manager within that area of management, or each individual as necessary. The manager also has to be accountable. It's the same manager who set the objectives and is responsible for running everything, making decisions, then basically is being accountable to himself. So that really makes an awful lot of sense. So internal control is pushing us well towards the idea of the decision of operational management from policy and strategy. So for one manager to undertake all the tasks that are required with internal control. And the point to you is that it isn't possible. And it is that the most difficult tasks will be ignored or badly undertaken. So the likelihood is that there will be little attention paid to policy and strategy development because operational management, doing all that detailed work, crowd out the time available for policy and strategy development. And for effective management, here, 4 essential characteristics. The man experience, hearing, how can a politician, in the understanding of the operational environment, management structure needs to be established because, as Manfred says, management takes place at all levels in an organisation. The storekeeper is a manager. The station is a manager. The Secretary General is a manager, if not all countries have them. They should set the operational objectives for the managers and the performance standards, and then monitor what's actually going on. That's part of the accountability process, and it's through that accountability process that the minister, the deputy ministers keep control. They don't keep control by making every decision. They do the accountability process. Delegation. If you're going to have a proper management structure, you've got to allow the managers to manage at all levels in the organisation. So delegation is essential, and the consequence of delegation is accountability. You've got to explain how you have used your delegated responsibilities. Auditing and accounting, these are things that are not, in my experience, ever really thought about. With public internal control, the question is, can you have the same budgeting and accounting arrangements as you have without public internal control? That the general budgeting and accounting rules were designed for the benefit of the Ministry of Finance, and they're to facilitate budget control, but also to reflect, when it comes to the budget itself, the policy priorities of the government. And budget control is very important and will always remain very important. But the manager wants a different set of information. He has to maintain budgetary control, but needs a lot of other information. He needs to know about cost centres. He needs to know about the actual performance against those various cost centres. He needs to know what his budget is. And a manager doesn't know what his budget is because there is a central budget, for example, for accommodation. There's a central budget for personnel. There's a budget sometimes for equipment. So a manager doesn't know exactly what it is he has in order to meet his objectives. Similarly, with the accounting information, he doesn't have the information which tells him how much that police unit is actually costing to run. He has that information which tells him how much that academic course is costing to run. He doesn't have information which tells him what that military training course was costing, and so on. So budgeting needs to change as well as the managerial responsibilities, because budgeting and accounting provides the information that enables the manager to fulfill his responsibilities. That of the coastal framework that Nick had mentioned. Using PISC are that you are moving towards a much more professionalised management. There is, rather than on inputs, there has a real emphasis on efficiency and effectiveness. These are terms which are used but don't actually have any substantive meaning. But with PIC, you have to give them substantive meaning. And there are plenty of ways of doing that. As I mentioned, the allocation of funding over cost centres, the accountability of those cost centres, how the cost centres perform, how one police unit clearing up particular types of crime compares with a police unit clearing up exactly the same type of crime but somewhere else, and so on. How's the political level of management to focus on policy and strategy, because through the delegation and accountability arrangements, policy decisions are focused on the minister, the deputy ministers, and other managers at lower levels are responsible for operational objectives and performance standards. Accountability, because all these are not being made by one person at the top of the organisation, they're spread out through the organisation, and enables those at the top, as I said, to be more effectively in control of the organisation, and taking a decision does not put them in control. And governance, again, because decisions are decentralised and they're also made closer to the problem, that there will be a better quality of decision. There will be much more discipline in the management process, which not everybody will welcome. That need to be overcome. These are the problems that you will be facing today. Political leaders really understand what PIC is about. Mostly they think it's only about financial and budgetary control, but it's not. It's a better quality of management, of which budgetary control are merely one aspect. New staff, they work very hard and they're in control and internal audit, but they don't have any training in management or in analysis or accounting techniques. And these are essential because this to promote public control to managers, to explain how it operates, how efficiency and effectiveness can be improved. All this involves the development of cost analysis and advanced accounting. As mapped out, is little linkage between public administration reform and public internal control reform. And laws relating to public control, public internal financial control, the term, in the legislation, you will see that these laws try to drive public administration reform, and it just doesn't work. So administration reform is essential to make sure that's compatible with public internal control reform, and public administration reform will determine the responsibilities of managers. Feel that they will lose control, as I said, because they're not making every decision. Accountability is the way to put them in control. Political leaders will lose opportunities for patronage, and they like to put their own people in their own place because they feel that this will generate loyalty, and they're very keen, political leaders, on loyalty. But there are necessarily put in place skilled managers, and skilled managers and financial analysts are often not available within the civil service because it doesn't recognise them, and it certainly doesn't pay them well to encourage them to stay. So there is a problem over recruiting and maintaining skilled managers and civil and financial analysts. But a further point is that there is trust between civil service and the political level, and this trust discourages civil servants from being to accept the responsibility for making decisions. And a serious problem which many issues have not sought to address, political leaders have not thought about, and certainly when it comes to public administration reform, it's not thought about either. So trust is basically a very difficult problem to overcome. It is in many countries, and yet it is essential, a little component that has to exist before delegation and accountability. Because if you don't trust people, you won't delegate, believe that they'll be properly accountable. Do you recognise these problems? And from your point of view, how can they be overcome? Do leaders in your country really want to improve the quality of public administration? Do they really efficiency and effectiveness? If they do that, that's brilliant. But are they just to please the EU to gain action, maybe additional financial support? Is that what they're really interested in, rather than the first two? Improving public administration, improving efficiency and effectiveness. So I think that you, as the CHUs, have your educational and awareness building program, capacity and the status to undertake this. The issues that you as the central harmonisation units and those you are pressing for improvements in public administration will need to address. Thank you very much.
So, thank you for this excellent presentation. And during your presentation, there was active discussion on chat. And since you just mentioned the importance of training and to stimulate and work on this training arrangements, actually there was a comment from Tomislav from Croatian AI.
Whom I know.
He can. Sorry, I will read out his comment. Tomislav remarked that he actually wrote, I'm quoting, "We have huge problem that professional investment into management, political and civil servant and financial managers / accountants were not done as for internal audit, now already are holding certificates. And when we add lack of proper performance management and lack of continuity, we have what we have." And also he added that for CHU would be important to work on trainings on performance management. Even before, Tomislav also remarked that we should all think on performance indicators of peak, on country level, on sector level, and on institution level. Reliable key KPIs would give us answer if we have a peak or not. Remarks, comment by Tomislav. Nova, would you like to address a comment by performance indicators on peak? You already addressed this actually in your presentation. So what would be your opinion on this?
And I have the floor now.
Yes, Noel.
Tomislav, I would, you're picking on really very important points. First of all, this point about training. The really real understanding of what management is about, for no perceived need for training. After all, I'm a politician. I'm elected, and somehow gives me automatic ability to do anything in any area on any subject, because I've been elected. I don't need any training. I know what needs to be done. That's why I've been elected. So there is a problem, a psychological problem, with getting over the problem of training. How do you get training? And in countries like the Netherlands, for that matter, or France, what's important is to have a very high quality civil service. And an awful lot of money is spent on training the civil service. In many of the countries in this region, of training of the civil service. We have some very able people in this, but supported. It's a real problem over that. And the EU and other organisations could spend more time and more effort on encouraging the training of on the question of the accounting training, what one needs is not audit training. That's what the accountancy profession mainly focuses on, but it needs more training on things like costing and management accounting information and things like that. There's not any that are easily accessible who can provide some training. There's a real problem there. Maybe it's something that the CEF has tried to focus on by courses on costing, for example, and the CEF could do more on that. But there is a real problem which you're focusing on and to solve, and I think that it requires more discussion with organisations like the CEF. Universities may also be able to help, but it would require the universities to move away from a more academic to a practical basis of training. Are the indicators? Well, I could give you a complete list of indicators, but I could give you some. First of all, do you know if PI, public internal control, is actually operational? Well, the first thing is, are there good objectives for the managers? Is there a management structure? Are there objectives for the managers to those objectives within this category using the acronym SMART? Are they precise? Can people be held accountable? So if there aren't good quality objectives, it immediately raises the question about whether or not there's actually a system of public internal control. Again, to ask, well, what sort of separation of responsibilities is there between the politicians, the political level, and operational level, the civil service level? Is there separation? We actually thought about the need to revise the budget arrangements, the need to revise the accounting arrangements. What we're talking about here is not altering the structures or the main structures of the budgeting and accounting arrangements, because the Ministry of Finance will always want to maintain those for a variety of reasons, which we don't need to go into. But do need to have much more elaborate coding systems which will allow those base costs to be broken down over different types of analyses that the manager wants. If they don't exist, then again it's doubtful if public internal control is actually put in place. Those are one or two examples, Tomislav. Time.
Thank you. And also you mentioned learning courses on costing and cost accounting, management accounting. Yeah, we already delivered two such courses on this very important topic, and we will for sure continue to have this topic included in our learn program. Now, since we are approaching 12 o'clock, but I would still like to turn to Manfred. Very interesting, this discussion about the importance of training for managers. And would you have any actually experience to share from the Netherlands, how it is done, training arrangements, not only for internal auditors, maybe also for other lines of defense?
Yes, a few additional remarks to what Noel said. I recognize. I
hear you.
Yeah?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I recognize the issues that Noel is raising. You know, I work with some of my colleagues in several countries, and in our training projects, in our technical systems, face the same problems. Internal auditors are easy to reach. They are always, let's say, willing and sent to training courses, etc., etc. But to reach managerial level, especially when we talk about senior managerial level, is very, very difficult, let alone political level, which is difficult to create on that level, let's say, awareness on the importance of PISC, but actually also to put the benefits of public internal control in the spotlight. And that is, and I fully agree with Tomislav, that is an issue, that is a problem. So what we see is that sometimes we are able to reach the managerial level, but usually that is the operational level. And usually what they are interested in is more, let's say, an instrumental approach. So they want to know what is COSO, how does it work, and that's it. But that is, of course, not creating awareness of how COSO fits in PIC, because COSO is just, let's say, a framework, an instrument, but the awareness of, let's say, the broader implications of public internal control goes beyond that. And that's still something that also in our projects we find very difficult to achieve. Well, in Netherlands, as you know, we have our own academy of financial management, learning institute, in which we put a lot of effort also in training managers in the issues that were discussed this morning. But yeah, that part has to do also with the willingness of these managers to show up and to work these public internal control issues institutions. So if I compare my experience abroad and at home, then it has a lot to do with also being open to change and being open to the concept as described. And that made me think about this last slide that Noel showed. What is that senior management really wants? Do they really want change, or is it just, let's say, more like a smoke curtain to continue as they always have continued? On a positive note, recently in Moldova, we had a very nice training for state secretaries. Indeed, in Moldova, currently they are trying to separate that political level from, let's say, operational managerial decision making in the instance by creating what they call state secretaries. They are comparable with, in the Netherlands, the secretary generals. Recently we had there, with that whole group with that managerial layer, we had in which we discussed PISC and also try to make them aware of their responsibilities in this respect. So that I see as a positive, let's say, development, which I also hope to see in the future in other countries. But difficulties remain. So I fully agree with Tomislav in that respect. Yeah.
Thank you, Manfred. You also mentioned some good positive improvements in one of constituency countries, also CEF. I would just, I know that it's only 1 minute remaining till 12 o'clock, but I would like to give also a quick word to Nihat. Maybe with us some also his observation on these topics, and maybe also some good examples he observed in the region.
Thank you. Well, I will just refer to what both Manfred and Noel were mentioning in terms of ensuring an appropriate reach. Public sectors, public administration in our countries are very large, and it will be very difficult for any single institution, and especially for a single department within the Ministry of Finance to promote and raise awareness and provide the framework for training of such a huge number of servants who need it. And in that context, I just want to promote the idea of seeking alliances in terms of those who do knowledge and skills in promoting sound internal controls and public management, seeking alliances with supreme audit institutions, with other sectors in the Ministries of Finance, with Ministries of Justice who are in charge of normally the public administration reforms. And just one single comment in relation to the point raised by Tomislav. I think that as long as on a very high focus on training of the internal auditors in the past, I agree that yes, equal attention should have been paid to both the managers and the finance staff, but at the same time, there's an opportunity here to leverage the training and the knowledge, the specialist knowledge of internal auditors in analyzing and providing recommendations for improvements to the internal control systems, adding them to champions of better institutions. And that's maybe a perspective to keep in mind, because ultimately it's possible for any single of those who need the training. Thank you.
Nihat, for concluding this webinar, I would like to thank everybody to listening, following this, for your very good observation, comments. Thank you in particular, Tomislav. And most of all, I would like to thank Manfred, Noel, Nihat. This very broad and important topic today, but as introduced already on our event page, working on the subject and provide 2 additional webinars on this topic in 2007. So we welcome you to continue following our event page for further webinars, and we will also inform you about this when they are published online. Regarding question about presentations, they will be all shared with you. We will be with you. And I already posted a link of the survey that I mentioned in the beginning, because we would really appreciate your feedback. And you can also use this survey to share with us any subject that you would like to really be covered in the next 2 webinars. Cover topics that are interesting. So thank you very much for being with us today. Have a nice Friday, and we are really looking forward to involving you again in a webinar. Thank you.